got it. So I just ordered a package that will be delivered to my home directly from my phone in the next 2 to 3 days. Have you ever wondered how those packages that you order from your phone actually get to you in an efficient manner? At this month's COMTO Colorado Lit podcast, you will learn about supply chain, logistics, and operations from the Executive Vice President of Supply Chain for Lowe, Mr. Don Frieson. We're excited to have him as a part of our COMTO Colorado Lit podcast, and you're going to listen to some different perspectives that you may not have heard from in the past. And so, moving the nation forward is what COMTO Colorado is about, so tune into this month's COMTO Colorado Lit podcast. I'm so excited to be able to...
Welcome back, everybody, to another wonderful episode of the COMTO Colorado Leaders in Transportation podcast, otherwise known as the COMTO Colorado Lit podcast. This is the place where you can hear from some of the best and brightest minds in the transportation industry. And I am so happy and blessed and grateful to have a longtime acquaintance and somebody that I have a lot of respect for in the transportation industry, and more specifically on the supply chain and logistics side. Oftentimes in transportation, we talk about how to move people, but our transportation system is really set up to move people and the things that people buy, which are goods and or freight. And so I'm so excited to have a unique and different perspective than we've had before in the past on our podcast. And today I have the Executive Vice President of Supply Chain for Lowe, Mr. Don E. Frieson. Mr. Frieson, good to see you. You're looking great, and welcome to the COMTO Colorado Lit podcast.
Well, thank you, Louis. It's been a long time. Hadn't seen you quite a bit. Thank you so much for this invitation.
Yeah, great. And likewise, you know, I just a short story. I started off my career in the private fleet for Walmart, and one of the first executives that I came across and noticed was Mr. Frieson. And I was so impressed. Man, it was almost 15, 20 years ago. And kind of seeing you in your particular position within a previous employer that you had at Walmart, and then just watching how you continue to lead in the supply chain logistics arena, and now at Executive Vice President for Supply Chain for Lowe. It's just great to see your ascendance and continued leadership in the industry. So appreciate you spending time with us today. So let's jump right into it. I as I mentioned before in my opening remarks, a lot of times, especially in the public sector, a lot of folks, a lot of politicians, a lot of leaders, the general public may not understand what supply chain, logistics, and freight movement is about. And I want to take this opportunity to hear directly from you as a longtime executive to kind of explain what's the importance of supply chain logistics industry to businesses and households in this country and quite frankly, globally.
You know, Eulois, it's a great question, and I would tell you it's a perfect opportunity for us to educate. When you think about supply chain and logistics, and just look around you, look around in your home, there is nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, that you touch on a day-to-day basis that has not at some point been part of a supply chain or logistics network. Now, in the simplest form, logistics is all about getting things from A to B in the most efficient way possible. Now, if you think how the landscape of shopping has transcended over the last few years, there's a term out there called omnichannel, which means you can shop from your phone, you can shop from your computer, you can walk in a store, however you want things. Retailers are providing that for you. But here's one rule of thumb. You cannot have a great omnichannel retailer without having a great omnichannel supply chain. A supply chain that recognizes different nodes, different modes of transportation, whether it's an imported good or a domestic good, or even a category we call domestic imports. We're always moving them to the right place in the right quantities so that you're able to make your purchase. So you may not know the words, you may not understand supply chain logistics, but know that it's in the background. You know, I often use an analogy with my team, and I said it's like a ship. You never see the people in the engine room, but you know somebody's down there. That's what supply chain and logistics is. We're the engine room.
Absolutely, and what through my studies and through my experience, and I'm sure you can attest to this, it is one of the ways in which a company can really distinguish itself in terms of being a strong retailer. When you are able to get the products to the right place at the right time and squeeze out the cost in doing so, it really can allow an operation to help lead a particular business in a specific sector. And so it is so vital. It is extremely important. And then as the country has continued to rely more on what you mentioned earlier, omni-channel types of operations and using your phone to do purchases and the like, the ability to get that product to the end user requires a whole sophisticated process in the back end, which nobody understands and nobody ever sees. And it's interesting being on the public sector side. You know, I get complaints a lot of times around why are these trucks coming in our neighborhoods, and these large trucks that are they're allegedly creating environmental issues or safety concerns and the like. But people do not make that connection that what you're wearing, the clothes on your back, the shoes on your feet, your food that you eat, it is being delivered by this industry. Supply chain and trucking is a part of that operation to get you what you purchase. So you need to appreciate it, and it's a part of a city's or a nation's economy. So I really appreciate you breaking that down. And I would say, one, the thing about the industry is it attracts a lot of different talent and different backgrounds. But how did you get into this interesting and unique industry?
Yeah, quite out of necessity, quite frankly. As a sophomore in college, I needed a part-time job, and that led me to United Parcel Service, which was a great way to work my way through school. But I learned a lot about the industry. UPS, as most of us know, is a world-renowned package deliverer. But if you think about it from a logistics and supply chain standpoint, they were always on the cutting edge of what was going on, whether it was how efficiently they loaded their trailers or routed their trucks, or even from an operations standpoint, you recognize that brown vehicle, that uniform, and it was much respected. And so I had an opportunity to start there, and it morphed into going to a large truckload carrier and working for them, and then moving on into supporting retail from a supply chain and logistics perspective. So it's just been a real natural progression for me. I used to say it's the smell of diesel. I don't smell that so much anymore. but it is really an exciting field. And look, it's never going away.
Right. And I remind folks of that fact, that last point, that the supply chain logistics, the ability to deliver a product, is fundamental to the country. And you will always have a job. If you come in, you work hard, you understand the operation, there will always be a need, and the need will just grow over time. So it's a great point. You mentioned earlier about how you remind your team about the importance of the industry, and try to excite them about their day-to-day type of thought process around what logistics means for a particular business. But what's your leadership style? What would you say your leadership style is? And then I would say, what would people say about you and your particular leadership style, and how you excite them and energize them to meet a mission of a particular organization?
Sure. I think I'm a collaborative leader. And you got to understand, when you are a support division like we are, it's very important to understand what your internal customer needs from you. In terms of leading my team, I think everybody's important. It doesn't matter what their role is. And so when you have a collaborative style, that means everybody gets in. Personally, I manage on what I call a continuum, where there are certain decisions that are on the far left end of that continuum that are so important, that are time sensitive, that I'll make those decisions. But as you move to the right side of that continuum, those are not so time-bound decisions, and maybe they won't make or break the organization. And so you can allow the team to make those decisions, thereby teaching them and helping them understand the importance of working together, coming up with a solution that everyone can live with and moving forward. And that's proven to be pretty effective for me over the course of my career.
Great. I love that description, leading on a continuum. And at the end of the day, it sounds like part of that is to empower the staff to make decisions, right?
Absolutely.
And probably coaching them. Yeah. The one thing, I'll go back to my Walmart experience, that there were terms, and it might be the same case in other outfits that you worked in, but the term coaching is something that I learned at Walmart. And once you get to a executive leadership position and you're having to have thousands of people as a part of an operation or a business, or in my case on the public sector side, you're trying to figure out ways that you can coach staff, not only your direct reports or your deputy managers and the like, but also coach staff that are actually doing the day-to-day work and delivering product. And in our case, going out and patching potholes or delivering trash to 180,000 residents and the like. The ability to coach staff is key. And so as an offshoot question, how do you feel about that term, and how have you used the concept of kind of coaching to empower the staff as you kind of lead that leadership continuum that you mentioned?
Well, Eulois, you have to go back to the origin of the word coaching. It's all about team. And you know that no matter what, and let's use sports as an example, team sports, there are different positions in all the team sports, but those positions are there for a reason, and they're all valuable. And so if you think about, if one person on that team is not able to accomplish their role, then it doesn't work. And that's where coaching comes in, right? Effective coaching at their position to ensure they understand their impact on the rest of the organization. And so coaching is a very positive term. It denotes you're taking an interest in those that you are leading, and you create much better teamwork. You provide the necessary coaching across the business that's needed for it to work well.
Yeah, it's a fantastic response, and the statement that you made around interest, showing an interest in those that you're leading, is extremely important. And so, just piggybacking off of that, I know that you value peer mentorship. That's something extremely important. I think that it's extremely valuable and important for people coming up throughout the industry to have somebody that they can rely on as a mentor. And I know you put a lot of value on that, but I would like to know and have you explain a little bit more about the value of peer mentorship and what makes those types of mentorships very valuable and beneficial to the people that you're actually mentoring.
Sure.
And then if there's examples in your career that you can kind of point to of how a peer mentorship relationship has really helped you advance.
Yeah, Eulois, the great thing about peer mentorship is that you have peers across the spectrum. And what I've often found is that many times when people think about mentorship, they're thinking about someone up the chain that's able to help me or sponsor me or teach me something I don't know. But in fact, there's a plethora of knowledge in that cubicle next to you or in that chair across from you. And in many cases, they have different responsibilities. And so when you're able to interact with them and understand their role and the things that they're involved with on a day-to-day basis, you become broader. And that's the great thing about peer mentorship, is that you start to learn new things that are outside your direct level of accountability or role. And when you do that, you become more valuable to the organization. And so I've always found that operating in a peer environment is so nurturing for you. You're not necessarily being competitive, you're learning from each other. And it's a two-way street. You're
Right.
giving knowledge and you're receiving knowledge. And I can't think of anything better than that. There are countless
Right.
examples in my career where I've walked across the hall, or I've had this tough conversation with someone prior to having a tough conversation with someone else to get those points of interface of the points I needed to make. And it's just been a very valuable resource for me. So I support peer mentorship in a really big way.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Yeah. Let me ask you this, Don. That's something that you promote as an individual leader. Hopefully, the organization that you're a part of helps support that peer mentorship mentality. For those leaders that are kind of new to leading an organization or are part of an organization that may not yet have that type of quality or culture yet embedded into that organization, what are some thoughts around how could a leader start to instill that philosophy and mindset and acceptance of a peer mentorship leadership approach and the importance of that moving forward? Because I think my experience in some of my positions is that we've had folks that have been in a very instrumental role within an organization for a very long time, maybe 2 to 3 decades, and folks are getting ready to retire, and then we're trying to figure out, well, where's the next swath of leadership that can come in and take the knowledge that somebody's acquired over 30 years and translate that into kind of a new way of doing things. And so it's a challenge. So any advice for us kind of young leaders that are trying to develop that culture to really have a beneficial workplace environment that fosters peer mentorship and really fosters leadership? What type of things that we need to focus in on from the outset to have that type of culture be embedded?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack with you. So when you start to think about it, peer mentorship can be clearly informal. It's not about a formal relationship as much as it is getting up, walking over, and talking with someone. And any environment can foster that. I think you get into this point around succession planning, it becomes a little more formal, and understanding when you're having those conversations, who's best equipped to come next. And that often comes from the person, as I stated earlier, that's the broadest in their role. And so it behooves each and every one of us to try to get broader. And again, that's where peer mentorship comes in, is that I'm learning from someone every day around the nuances of what they're doing. You know, early in my career, you'd hear associates say, you know, I'm sitting here, I've mastered this job and I'm bored. Well, really wrong thing to say and wrong thing to do. Because if you're bored, then let's get up. Let's walk across the hall. Let's look over the cubicle and say, hey, John, what are you working on? And how might I help? That creates a whole different level of involvement. And you're certainly not bored when you're working on something new. You then become known as a de facto leader. So even if you haven't been promoted, you become the go-to person on your team. And let's face it, ultimately, it's your peers that get you promoted and not necessarily your bosses.
Yeah, I love that one. Kind of lead where you are. If you lead where you are, regardless if you have somebody reporting to you or not, showing the initiative and having some ambition and going up and working through people to get something done, definitely creates that term of being a de facto leader. And you're right. You don't really think about it, but your peers and what people say about you goes a long way into the upper ranks of an organization and how they view you. And if you go in and your peers are saying that this is somebody that can get something done, that's going to resonate with the management at a higher level, and they'll start to point to that person that they can deliver results, and they're doing it without having the title behind them and the like. And so those are really great points of note. And we're going to highlight that through this, because I think I'll be quite frank, that is the main difference between what I've seen in the private industry and the public sector industry. The focus on coaching, the focus on encouraging and challenging our peers, and then letting a person have the opportunity to have the ambition to move up. That's something that I think the public sector hasn't yet grabbed onto, but we're trying to work on it. We're trying to work on it moving forward. And you talked about kind of, I think, the persistence of somebody coming in to try to become that de facto leader. But what other qualities do you recognize in most successful leaders? And what are some other rules of leadership success that you can share?
Sure. Well, first of all, you've got to be a self-starter. Success starts from within. And I think sometimes you hear the term born leader, when in fact, leading can be learned. And so you don't necessarily have to say it's a gift that I have, because it can be developed. And that's really important, that everyone needs to understand that. I think when I'm looking at leaders or looking for leaders, I look for those that don't take no for an answer. Those individuals that are extremely determined, and they understand what the results need to be. That they're able to charge ahead, but make sure that they bring people along with them. Because again, at the end of the day, there is no I in getting accomplishments done within the organization. It's always a team that gets things done. And so it's got to be an individual that understands the importance of teamwork, that understands the importance of respect, and understands that everyone plays a role. They're all important. Our roles might be different. One may pay more than another, but they're very important. So the guy that's filling the potholes, and I'm a car enthusiast, he's really important to me, right?
right.
So
exactly.
You got to treat everyone well.
Yep. And I'll just go back through some of the points. Respect, understanding the importance of teamwork, being a self-starter. And I love this, the one point that you made, which is kind of don't rely or take a no, or be comfortable with a no, right? Figure out a way to get the yes. And I think those are some really good sound qualities that everybody can actually live by. So I definitely appreciate this. So let me take a break real quick, and we've been talking about a lot of leadership tactics and the like, and things that you have led in your career. But you mentioned that you're a car enthusiast. What else do you do for fun? What are some of the hobbies that you have going on around the Frieson world?
Yeah, so I'm an avid golfer. Love getting out on the links when possible. Since this past year has been a little more difficult than previous years, but with all of us having so much going on, I did mention being a car enthusiast. I'm very well read on anything automobile, period. So whether it's a combustible engine or the new electric technology, I'm just interested in how things work. And so I've been a fan for a number of years. So my wife says I'm a walking encyclopedia. So I think there are worse things that she could probably say. So always excited to be with a group of people and talk about those things. We like to travel, and again, not so much this past year, but as things open up, my wife's an avid tennis player, and so we get our share of outdoor activities in.
Good. Yeah, I haven't swung a stick or a golf club in a minute, so it's last time I did, I think I have one of the nastiest slices in history. I cannot hit the ball straight to save my life, so I need to take some lesson from you at some point.
Well, it's a good thing you don't make your money that way.
Yeah, I'll be in deep trouble if that was the case. That's for sure. But that's good. That's good. So let me ask you, based off of your love for cars and the like, any thoughts about the transition from the combustible engine to a more quote unquote cleaner version or more electrification of vehicles moving forward? Any thoughts about how it's going to impact vehicle purchases moving forward, or just the industry as a whole?
Well, I think as we take a look at our environment and understanding that is so important, that we have an environment that can sustain the next generation, I think we all have to look at alternatives to fossil fuel, quite frankly. And I'm not making a stance either way, just to say that we have to be open to it. As a matter of fact, my wife and I are purchasing our first all-electric vehicle. And so it'll be interesting because I've always thought about them as a commuter vehicle. What do you do when you want to go further? And so when you think about from a public perspective, how do we start to think about building out infrastructure that supports that, so that technology can be furthered and we're able to use electric cars anywhere we are. The companies experimented with hydrogen some years ago, and so different fuel sources. But I think we all need to get our heads wrapped around. We all will be driving a hybrid or an electric vehicle somewhere soon.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting that you say that as people start to purchase more electric vehicles, that one of the key factors for allowing the industry to transition to a more electrified fleet is the supporting infrastructure, whether it be charging stations in particular locations, or the supporting electrical grid that's necessary to actually power those charging stations. And that's something on the public sector side we're trying to figure out how to advance quicker, so we can help support the proliferation of those electric vehicles throughout the industry. So there's a lot of money that's coming from a variety of different sources. And I know where I am in Denver, we have been very focused on leveraging our public spaces and public facilities to provide that charging infrastructure so people can use their electric vehicles, not just for getting around, within 5 or 10 miles of where they live, but as a true commuter option moving forward. And I think a lot of cities and a lot of states are trying to advance their infrastructure to really help support the adoption of electric vehicles. So it's definitely a great point. So let me ask you this, that we talked about how perhaps cities can help support electrification of fleets, but what else can cities do to help support the movement of freight and goods and this whole unique and exciting industry of supply chain and logistics? What can cities like Denver, what can states do to do a better job to help move the economy forward?
Eulois, as I think about that, I think one of the most important things is for cities to always keep up with infrastructure. It is so important. And by infrastructure, I mean roadways, access are really important. The development of industrial complexes that will allow logistics and supply chain operations to reside. Things that are facilities that are close to major roadways or thoroughfares that present easy access. And so when you're thinking about a master plan, that should always be factored in. When you're thinking about a budget or a city budget or even state budget, how do we make sure that we keep the roadways safe for not only our supply chain vehicles, but for our personal vehicles? I mean, it is so important because we have to operate on those same roadways. And how do you keep that in mind as you think about the growth of metropolitan areas and beyond?
Absolutely. And I can tell you from experience in transitioning from private industry into public sector, especially working for local governments, that there is such a disconnect with the infrastructure and what it's supposed to support in terms of moving freight, and whether it be rail or whether it be freight being moved via truck of all different types of sizes. And I think a lot of times the infrastructure that we plan for doesn't consider that stakeholder into the process. And so I know over the past 10 to 15 years, there's been a concerted effort to try to make sure we hear the voices of carriers and other logistical outfits to make sure that their feedback is included into the planning process. But what are ways in which that we can do a better job in either doing outreach to make sure we get major retailers like Lowe's or major carriers like your UPSs and the like involved in the city planning process? Yeah, do you have any thoughts about ways that we can kind of challenge ourselves to do a better job in including those stakeholders?
Yeah, thank you. It's a great question, and I don't pretend to have the answers to that. I think that public-private partnerships are always the way to go. And I think when you bring more people to the table and have those discussions, the better results you get. So I would certainly say that it just starts with some level of collaboration between freight entities, between the public sector, and even through folks that are providing the services. Get them all to the table. I'm not sure who should initiate that, quite frankly, but it will certainly be beneficial for all parties involved.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to let you know, we being Denver and the Denver Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, we have launched our first ever long-term and long-range transportation plan that we have a horizon year of 2050, and we're trying to figure out how to have our infrastructure help support moving people, goods, and services. And we're actually going to set up a freight committee to help guide the recommendations from that plan. So those of you who are watching this, you hear the importance of including freight and logistics stakeholders into the planning process from a city or government perspective. But one way in doing so is actually providing a forum for people to speak up and to share their perspectives and what the needs are in their respective interest area or industry. And so I've always valued that. I think there's feedback that I've received through those planning processes that makes the design of our transportation infrastructure much more safe and one that can move all modes of transportation, regardless if you're moving people or goods. And so Don, and you'll probably hopefully be made aware of more opportunities for folks like yourself or any of your industry partners to participate in those planning processes at the state or the local government level.
Awesome.
Great. Well, Don, hey, let me just open it up real quick. Is there anything else you would like to share from your perspective to our viewers here before we kind of sign off?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for inviting a different perspective. And I know our conversation was probably somewhat out of bounds in terms of what you guys traditionally discuss. But I do think it's important to have a different perspective on what you're doing and how others are involved. And so certainly on behalf of supply chain and logistics, COMTO Colorado, I appreciate the invitation to join you guys today. I'm excited about the work that you're doing and wishing you guys the best.
Well, definitely appreciate it. And again, just to emphasize that supply chain logistics is here to stay. And if you're looking for a great long-standing career, this is one that you can choose, and you see an example right in front of you, Mr. Don Frieson, who is the Executive Vice President of Supply Chain for Lowe's. Don has held many leadership positions throughout the industry and has been considered a vanguard within the supply chain world. And so we're just so grateful that you took time out of your busy schedule to sit down and have a conversation with me. And then hopefully from this, some of our viewers can see the importance of supply chain logistics and freight movements as we move forward. So thanks very much, Don, for your time.
And thank you so much.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for us today. So again, appreciate everybody tuning in to our COMTO Colorado Live podcast. Remember, COMTO Colorado is here to ensure that you build, organize, learn, earn your way to a great transportation career. That being said, signing off, good day.